I paid too dirty for your hit yesterday. I always pay. Although it's not often somebody hits me for $7,000. Sit down.
I don't want to sit. I want my money.
Too dirty will be here in a few minutes to make us dead now. I'm gonna sell you a house. Go on, sit down.
Our program is People in Jazz, and today our man in jazz is Wes Montgomery.
Check it out.
Here we are again, another live stream from the new studio of Pro Cannabis Media. This is Cannabis Chat, and I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. Very happy you're joining us here on a Wednesday. We call this Professor Weed Wednesdays because we focus on education and how important education is to the cannabis universe. And who better to have in studio than a director of training and development, someone who really knows education about the plant, from our friends at Revolutionary Clinics. His name is Andrew Elk. Andrew, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you, Jimmy, for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
And it's interesting that you are here, and this is kind of goes to how far we've come as a COVID-engaged society. The last public event that I was at was the open house when Central Square opened up for Rev Clinics. I believe it was March 6th. It was a Thursday.
Yeah, it was.
And we interviewed you there.
Yeah, we did. I had much shorter hair then.
Yes, you had much shorter hair then, and good for you for growing it out and letting it go, because you said to me on the phone you hadn't got it cut.
No, I have not gotten it cut. It started as a joke, and now it's a hairstyle.
Now it's part of your style and your look, and good for you. And I also noticed you've got your red bow tie on, which is the same bow tie that I saw you when you were demonstrating the bubbler on the video that's on your website. There's significance to the bow tie.
Yes, so bow ties are my thing. I used to wear straight ties every day for about 2 years. So a bow tie is actually less work than a straight tie. It doesn't bounce around as much. You don't need to have a tie clip. But the red and black are the Rev Clinics colors. So I love this bow tie, and it always gets a laugh out of people.
My late father used to wear bow ties all the time, and if I had to tie it, I probably could. But that was before the arthritis gripped my fingers. Let's not go there, okay? So what we do here, just so you know, right off the top, is I kind of give some of the news of the day. There's been some news. I'm sure you've heard that last night in Cleveland, Ohio, there was a little event between the president and the Democratic nominee for President Joe Biden, former Vice President Joe Biden, and President POTUS. We don't like to even name who that is because he doesn't have respect for that office. Why should we give him respect? Yes, that's how I feel. And certainly his bullying tactics were on full display last night in Cleveland. And speaking of Cleveland, in about an hour and a half from now, we'll be talking with the director of education for the Cleveland School of Cannabis. They're friends of ours. They follow us. We hope to be working with them throughout this ongoing venture of Pro Cannabis Media. And that's Lisa Zwirner, and she'll be joining us via Zoom. And we look forward to that as well. She'll talk about their curriculum and why that is one of the fastest growing schools of cannabis in the world, which is kind of exciting.
Really exciting.
So we'll be talking to him. Now, let's get back to Andrew. Let me rephrase it. I'm going to go back to my news because there is a news item that is definitely worth mentioning here in the cannabis universe, and it has to do with the government of the United States and the fact that once again another COVID bill is being introduced to the Congress, and sure enough, the word cannabis is in it 62 times. And only the Republicans know how many times that word's in it because they counted it, okay? And they made a big deal over the fact that, well, cannabis is mentioned more times than jobs. Excuse me, guys. The idea is to hire people in the cannabis industry as it expands, thus creating jobs, thus creating taxes to undo all the things that we haven't been able to get done in Washington, D.C. for a long time because of this complete stalemate that has been going on now for a couple of years, certainly since the House has been controlled by the Democrats. And by the way, this is not a political show. I am not going to point fingers, and I'm not going to name blame. This is where we are right now. We're in a free country. We get to talk about it. But Andrew, I'm going to guess, since you are in the business, how frustrating is it that it's not expanding as much as it could?
Oh, it's incredibly frustrating. I mean, we in Massachusetts have learned so many lessons from California, from Colorado. Every state has different laws and legalities around what allows a business to open, what allows you to conduct a transaction. But every state in succession has lessons to be learned for others. I know that Pennsylvania and Michigan are both looking at expanding. They're both ones who've mentioned looking at Massachusetts as a model for how to work and operate and open successfully. I'm really excited that we're continuing to see incremental progress, but that's what this is incremental, not expansive.
No, it is not. And, as we know, if you watch this show or have heard me talk, Rev Clinics is a medicinal cannabis dispensary.
That is correct.
In Somerville, with 2 locations in Cambridge, one in Central Square and one in Fresh Pond. I have been in each one, but my go-to dispensary is Fresh Pond in Cambridge. It's about 17 minutes from my house. And just for the record, I drive by about 4 other dispensaries to get there. Okay.
Thank you very much.
I support the cause, as it were. And sure enough, there's something that just came out today about the effectiveness of cannabis for migraine pain. Now, do you suffer? Have you ever had a migraine?
I've been very fortunate not to have migraines, but I've known people my whole life who've had them.
I know someone in the room who suffers from migraines. Let's just say, I will not name who it is, but he's in the room. And I know for a fact that it does ease some of the debilitating effects that migraines have. I've seen what happens to people when they get migraines, and they just have to shut down and go into a dark room. And I believe anything that can be done to help that. And sure enough, this this was 2019, the Journal of Pain conducted a study which found inhalation of cannabis to decrease headache and migraine pain up to 50%. This is a new study that has come out, and sure enough, that too supports some of the old studies. This is migraines affect, just so you know, 39 million, okay?
Wow.
And it does say this recent study collected data from 10,000 migraine sufferers, okay, which is pretty extensive, right? They say about 8 in 10 or 82% have said they have found relief from their consumption of cannabis. It's a prominent treatment option for chronic pain patients, especially for migraineurs. Didn't even know that was a word, migraineurs.
Yeah.
But that's what it is. And that came out today as well.
Jimmy, I mean, I don't think it's terribly surprising, right, that cannabis is incredibly effective for pain management or for migraines, but what I think is so exciting about this is scientific, double-blind study evidence for what we've known anecdotally for a really long time, that cannabis is useful for a myriad of conditions, pain management chief amongst them.
Right, and that's, I qualify for that just because I've had 4 surgeries in 20 years, and it was rather easy when I walked in. I showed them my fingers and hands, and they went, here you go. And it's all about maintenance. When you get older, when you get more mature, okay, it's about maintenance of your pain. Everybody has aches and pains. Some have chronic pain that just rears its ugly head at the weirdest time, like in the middle of the night I'll wake up with pain in my fingers, and it wakes me up at night. So again, I take a ton of CBD oil. I take my turmeric, or is it turmeric, it's that orange spice thing. And I take, straight CBD drop or 2, and then I have a 2-to-1 or a 1-to-1 whenever I consume. But
you're not alone. I think most people, especially in the medical community, who are using cannabis, and there is an enormous population of people in the medical cannabis community who are finding relief and help from cannabis. For most of those people, and a whole bunch of other people who don't have their medical card, the real benefit of cannabis is quality of life improvement, maintenance, like what you're talking about.
It's about maintenance. And it is quality of life. And also, one of the things we do like to do here is we like to balance our feelings about this, because it does not cure everything.
No.
And it can be abused if you use it too much. And this is why I preach responsible use.
Right.
It has a medicinal effect. Therefore, you're really self-medicating.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
And you have to learn what your own body can handle and what your metabolism will handle, and what might work. 10 milligrams for me might wipe somebody out completely, or not even affect them at all.
Right.
I mean, I know grown adults that they can take 50 milligrams a day and function, and that is an unbelievable thing. when I hear about that.
Oh, yeah.
But it has to do with the fact that their bodies are now used to it. So their endocannabinoid system is absorbing the amount, and that's what it takes to balance their system.
Right. I mean, any drug out there, you're going to build up a tolerance over time. That's perfectly typical. And with cannabis, it's really about, starting low, going slow, figuring out what works for you. The beauty of a medical card or operating in a state that's decriminalized and has legal operators is that you can ask questions. You can go into a store. You can have a virtual consultation these days, and you can find out what works for you.
Let me ask you about virtual consultations,
Yeah.
because I know because of COVID now, revolutionary clinics and a lot of medicinal dispensaries and adult use recreational dispensaries too have gone to this curbside pickup.
Right.
Okay, so if I wanted to have a consult, how does one go about doing that at Rev Clinics? Is it an email, and how do they go about doing that?
So it's all through our website. Basically, you can go onto our website. There are a couple ways you can do it. There's immediately a little chat robot that engages you, and you can say, I'd like a virtual consult, and you'll basically get pushed to a scheduling calendar function that will allow you to book an appointment with a real human being who you'll sit across a screen from, and they can spend 10 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour and a half. We've had an enormous positive feedback swell from people as we've offered this option.
Right.
And the other thing that as a medical dispensary, we were serving a medically fragile patient base, right? Our customers are people with pre-existing conditions, with comorbidities. So we had to really be purposeful in how we were going to continue to operate, continue to run our business, and protect both our customers and our staff. I'm really proud to say that we've had 0 cases of community spread within our organization. We've locked down, we've taken action, and I really see us as a model. I see other shops, frankly, clothing stores, restaurants that don't have that have not taken the same level of care that we have.
Right, and Massachusetts, as we know, was really one of the first states to really have it bad, along with New York City.
Right.
And, like I said, I remember that week. That Thursday was the last public event that I was at.
Right.
The following Thursday was the last We Talk Live that we did. And that was in Quincy. We had a studio we rented in Quincy. And then we all went into the COVID quarantine. And my partner in crime, Curt Dalton from Cannabis.net, and I have done all of our news shows via Zoom. And a little bit later, we'll be using Zoom to get to the Director of Education. It's a great news gathering and talk show gathering. You've seen so many webinars. I think you guys have run a few webinars too.
Yeah.
I will say this. I miss the interaction. I think that cannabis as a social entity, it has definitely taken a hit. I was reading an article recently about the socialization aspect of it, that you're not sharing joints out in the public. You're just not, okay? And that was always part of the culture, right?
Right, absolutely.
And I use when I happen to be in a group and I happen to be recreating, I use those filters so that everybody has their own filter.
Exactly.
And use the widget too. I'll throw that in there as a little bit of a plug for them. But anyway, the socialization aspect has and going into the dispensary and having that one-on-one has taken away a little bit. But I like the fact that you guys are making your people available online to those. And I wonder if there's an opposite effect too.
Right.
Because there are certain people out there that are still a little uncomfortable walking into a dispensary, even if they had their medical card, and they know that they're on camera and security and what have you. And, I understand all that. So we miss that.
Right.
And eventually Massachusetts will have social clubs. Eventually. I never thought eventually we'd have legal adult use cannabis in my home state. The fact that we're talking about social clubs, I'm just going down a limb thinking eventually we will have that. It'll probably be in town of Uxbridge or something like that. But another reason to go out to the tiny town of Uxbridge and visit our friends Caroline's out there. But we're getting closer and closer to the 420 mark, and this is the time when I get to enlighten people. Now I'm going down a limb thinking, the origination of 420.
Oh God! Well, I've heard so many stories, but yeah, please tell me.
As we warm up the harmonica, okay. The origination, it's from a group of young men from San Rafael, California. They were in high school in 1971.
Right.
And at 4:20 in the afternoon, they would meet at the Louis Pasteur statue, and they would catch a buzz after school. So it was, hey, 420, hey, 420. Sure enough, the police picked up on this, and that became 420 going on outside this, not necessarily at that place, but that was the call if there was public consumption of cannabis. There's a 420 going on.
Police code, yeah.
Police code, right. So those were the Waldos, and that was in 1971, which does coincide with the year that I first tried it.
Wow.
In 8th grade. I was 14. Do the math, I'm 63. Okay? Bottom line is that was code now in cannabis. Time to go out and catch a buzz and chill out and relax. Well, when I was growing up, it was a song called Shanty by Jonathan Edwards, and it was played on an AM daytimer. I'm going to guarantee, I'm going to call Tom Schneider out here. I guarantee he remembers WCAS in Cambridge. It was a 7:40 AM daytime radio station, and they used to play Shanty in the afternoon, or not necessarily in the evening, but because they were on in the evening. As soon as the sun went down, the radio station shut off. But it was an alternative rock station. Jonathan Edwards is from New Hampshire. He had a hit song called Sunshine Go Away Today, Don't Feel Much Like. Anyway, this is the cult song of my generation. And this is Jonathan Edwards performing at the Portsmouth, New Hampshire public radio station. Check it out and enjoy Shanty.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car. I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on every night and day. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God, Jonathan.
WSCA Studios, and thank God it's not Friday yet, okay? It's Wednesday. It's Professor Weed Wednesdays. This is Cannabis Chat. I'm Jimmy Young, and I'm in studio with Andrew Elk. That's the deal. Now, in the break, because we take a break, first of all, Andrew admitted he'd never heard the song before.
Never heard it before.
But you like it.
I really like it. It's a great cannabis song.
And it is a great, to me, it's the cannabis song, and it certainly fits at 420. So we play it on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays when we go live in studio from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. And Mondays is the day we do cannabinoid medicine shows.
Right.
Wednesday is our Professor Weed Wednesday, our educational moment. And then on Friday, David Rabinovitz joins us, and we talk about financial stuff. Basically, we call it the Green Rush Show.
I love
because
it.
Everybody's doing a green rush.
I love it.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
All right. So one of the things we talked about, just in passing, was the infusion world that's going on.
Right.
Right? And certainly in your lifetime, you will see this. I don't know when I'm going to get a chance to see it, but I do know that in California, of course, right, there is a infused drink called Chill. Aptly named, I would think, right?
Right.
And basically there are powdered drink mixers. One has 10 milligrams of THC infused lemon, and another is a watermelon mixer with 5 milligrams THC to 5 milligrams CBD, the one-to-one thing, right? Both labeled as fast-acting discreet. Meanwhile, this writer, and I'm pretty sure it was for the Emerald Media Group, Emerald Magazine out of New York, another one of our affiliates, sure enough, she does a whole review and says, hey, it was really relaxing. Took about 20 minutes to feel the effects. Best for a beach day or lounging. Sitting around the shanty, for instance, would be a good time to try it.
Yeah.
And so that was, and I think you will see it. I will see it at some point, maybe.
Oh.
And it's a reason why Constellation Brands invested millions of dollars into canopy growth, because they're Molson, and you would think they would be putting CBD at least in their beer, if not a mixture of a little THC too.
Right. I know California fought pretty hard against it. I know there was sort of a THC beer in the works, and pretty famously, it's sort of, they were put out of business overnight, but because the legislators said you can have cannabis or you can have alcohol, but you can't put them together. So.
Well, I'll admit there are times when I have put them together.
Yeah.
And I've learned from Dr. Tischler that it is 8 times the effect.
Wow.
Okay? So I just want to say, be careful, use it responsibly.
Exactly.
Start low, go slow, all that stuff, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Right? What's the biggest aspect of your job as a trainer when it comes down to explaining the benefits and some of the cautious tales you might tell to people that come in to see you and talk to you?
Well, it starts with something you said earlier, which is about focusing on the person you have in front of you, understanding that my body chemistry is different from your body chemistry. So for me, the very first place I start with, the most important thing is, what is this person's experience level? What are they trying to achieve? Do they have a history of, do they have trouble getting to sleep? Do
they have an
anxiety?
addictive disorder? Because
Exactly.
that can be difficult too.
Absolutely, because cannabis, like sugar, like alcohol, like table salt, like all of these things, caffeine, all of these things can be abused, and many of those things I just listed, cannabis included amongst them, lots of people manage to use effectively without issue and improves their quality of life.
Right, and it's always the go-to argument I have with people, and they say, oh, you're addicted to it. I'm like, I'm not addicted to it because I can stop at any time and have no effect. By the way, have you ever skipped a day without caffeine?
Right.
Because you get a raging headache almost automatically.
Right.
And that means your body is craving something it needs to balance itself. And it's giving your head pain because it's not there.
Right.
Same kind of thing with cannabis. It balances the neurotransmitters in your body, right?
Exactly. And even if you or I didn't need THC on a daily basis, you know, there are a lot of people out there who do. They need pain management. They need assistance. They're looking for something because they can't find a solution in their life otherwise.
Right.
And my point would be, I don't think it's right to say those people, the solution they found, I don't think the solution's invalid. They have a right to, at least in Massachusetts, they have a right to use and pursue that, in this case, cannabis avenue.
Absolutely. And how many times have you heard, cannabis has saved my life, cannabis has changed my life?
So many times, every day, almost every day.
It's pretty amazing,
Yeah.
especially when you're in the business and people know that you are some kind of expert on this, right? And speaking of expert on this, as a director of training, I checked out your video, okay? And the video that you have where you are demonstrating the bubbler.
Right.
Okay. Now, is this a dabbing device or is this a smoking device?
So I would say a bubbler is any smoking pipe that has a water component, right?
So it's a bong.
It is a bong. So exactly, a bubbler is a mini bong. It is a smaller bong.
Well, you actually show, and we're going to play this video in a
Right.
second, but I mean, you show the different chambers it goes through. And when I was in college, we borrowed some beakers
Right.
from the chemistry lab,
Right.
and we created this thing
Right.
called Horus, and it was basically a bong with multiple helpers. You know, it was
Right.
kind of like a hookah,
Right.
with chemistry parts.
Right.
And we nicknamed it Horus.
Oh, that's so funny.
We were funny.
But the idea,
especially when we used it.
But the the idea is that you're really just filtering smoke, right?
Right.
A bubbler, a bong, adding water, extending the length of time it takes from ignition source, the flame, to your throat, right? Like our throat doesn't like hot smoke, so the more we can cool it down, condition it. Exactly.
Ice. We used to put ice in the bong.
Exactly.
Come on, that's old school.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's check out Andrew demonstrating the bubbler.
I have before us a beta glass water pipe, a very advanced one. It would be more accurate to call it a recycler. The primary function of this water filtration system is actually to recycle water in a continuous flow as you inhale. The trick is actually to filter smoke through multiple complex compartments and water chambers. First, we have an extended downstem leading to a shower head percolator, which is going to spin our vapor or smoke into a vortex. Leaving the shower head perk and filtering up through the water, it rises through the Fabergé egg body. As water travels upward, it cycles through the Klein triangular circular top and filters back down in to be pulled again and again. That by the time the smoke actually gets to your lips, you have a much softer final product. Water pipes come in a tremendous variety of shapes and sizes, and they serve different functions. You have different glass to different activities. The reason both of these pipes are primarily suited toward concentrate use comes down to how complicated their internal structure is. You could absolutely do tremendous filtration of plant material with either one of these water pipes. The problem is they're so beautiful and complicated and frankly expensive that plant matter will dirty the inside of your pipe much more quickly than concentrate use will. My preference is actually to put it in my refrigerator before I leave for work, and when I come home it's actually quite cool and nice. Water conditioning and cooling are the two best ways to soften smoke or vapor for a much more pleasant experience.
All right, so we're back, and Andrew's still wearing the same tie, I might add.
It's my lucky tie.
So you were explaining a little bit more about the difference between vaping and flaming.
Right,
Well,
totally.
they both need a flame, I guess, even the vaporing.
Kind of.
So
So
the guy took out the butane torch. I was a little freaked by that, okay?
Right.
But I get you have to heat it up in order to get the vapor going.
Exactly. So it comes down to, are we talking about flower material? So you're talking about traditional cannabis.
The plant.
Exactly, the plants we're talking about.
Right,
So
yeah.
that's combustion, traditional, like a flame with a lighter.
Right.
If you're talking about dabbing, you're talking about a specialized bowl piece. We're talking about concentrate marijuana. Sometimes it's called wax, batter, butter, shatter. Basically, we take the plant and we condense that THC down into a much smaller form factor.
Yep.
And then that tiny little sliver is the equivalent of smoking like 3 joints, all in one hit, all at once.
Yeah, it's very intense. Okay, that's the extraction process.
Right.
And the director of education from Cleveland School of Cannabis she actually teaches extraction.
Wow.
So I said, we're going to talk about decarboxylation.
Yeah.
Which is like one of my favorite words. That and cannabidiol and cannabinoids and endocannabinoid. I mean, you have to say all these words now.
There are so many things to learn. It's really wild.
Well, it 100% correct. And when you talk to a science officer of a testing lab, for instance, okay, whether it's MCR or CDX, either one of those two, those are the two I know, and they are by far the most intelligent people I've ever talked to. Now, granted, I was a sportscaster for 25 years, so it's very small, you know what I'm saying. But, and I don't mean to discount the student athlete out there, and there are some very intelligent athletes. In fact, one in particular, Jaylen Brown for the Celtics is a brilliant guy. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Because I always sneak in some sports.
I love it.
It's just what I got to do. I just got to do. All right, so we certainly talked about the bubbler. We understand the difference between vaping. Now, there are a lot of doctors, cannabis certified doctors, that don't approve of dabbing or the combustion in the vaping that goes on with the dabbing. And they just don't like the combustion. And I had Julie Battle in here. She's an RN and from Cannawise, and she talked about she doesn't think putting oil in your lungs is a good thing. And I said, well, it's not really the oil, it's the vapor from the oil.
Exactly.
And I said to her, I said, look, when I was a kid, when I was a young father and my child had a cough, we would bring the child into the bathroom filled with steam. When I go into a steam room, I breathe in steam, hot steam.
Right.
So what's the difference?
So our understanding is that it comes down to temperature, right? So the problem with combustion is hot smoke in our throat and lungs. Nobody likes it. That's why we add ice. That's why we add water.
Gotcha.
Now, vaping, the idea of we're actually not combusting when we're vaping. So
you get right up to that point.
Exactly.
Right?
We're basically using electronic means, basically an oven. We have a tiny oven space, just like the oven in your kitchen, and that's heating up our flour or our concentrate material to the exact temperature where THC starts to float off of the physical material, whether that's plant or whether that's shatter, wax, butter, what have you. So you reach that ideal temperature range, and then you're exactly like you're saying. So you're just inhaling the vapor floating off that material, and that's usually at between 300 and 400 degrees. If you are going for low temperature dabbing, it's sometimes called. It's like the lit tip of a joint, the lit tip of a cigarette is about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So travels down your throat. That's hot.
Right. This is why I use the Ouija. I hate to say it, but I use that filtration system, and it works really well. And I also noticed that when I was losing my dabbing virginity at the Freedom Rally a few years back, he was telling me it had to get to 500 degrees in order to create it. So again, people are playing with medicine.
Right.
And this is, again, we get it. It can be dangerous. I'm not going to say it can't be. It can be dangerous. I think anytime you're using a butane torch, by the way, or even a lighter, it can be dangerous. Okay, I mean, you burn the edges of your fingers sometimes.
And I mean, I'm not a torch user myself. I prefer to use what are sometimes called e-rigs or dab rigs. Basically, I have a battery pack that replaces my torch. That's basically has a little chamber that heats up. Because I'm with you, the torch is a little scary to me. It's like
smoke. It's like crack. I don't need that. That's not what I need. That's not what I'm looking for here.
It's hardcore cannabis culture.
Yeah, I understand.
But it's definitely not for everybody. It's not really even for me.
Yeah, and again, it's up to you how you want to titrate, how you want to partake
Absorb.
with this subject. And unfortunately, there's a lot of guinea pig going on. You have to be a guinea pig. You have to try it to see what is going to work for you, because as we've established, what's good for me may not be good for Andrew. Andrew, what's good for Andrew may not be good for me. Whatever. How many stories and how many people have you talked to who perhaps have learned the hard way?
Right.
And usually it's with edibles.
Usually it is with edibles. So I have definitely heard a fair number of stories. I've seen I remember back to college, I've seen a fair few stories play out in front of me. For me, the number one thing is understanding that a lot of people, first of all, if you have access to medical grade edibles where you know the milligrammage, like most people who, when they try edibles for the first time.
2.5 milligrams is the entry level dose.
Exactly.
Please do not use more than 2.5 milligrams your first time, like I used when I was told by a patient advocate.
Right.
Oh yeah, I don't even like to use that word, bud tender.
Right.
Try this, and it was 33 milligrams.
Yeah.
That was way too much.
Way too much to start.
Especially when I had a martini.
Because
earlier in the night.
I'm a 50 milligram guy, right? Like that's where I feel really comfortable, and
Wow.
I could eat that every single day, and I'd feel wonderful.
Wow.
But it took me a really long time to get there. I know people who take 100 milligrams a day. We've seen patients who take 1,000 milligrams a day.
And those are the ones who need it for medicine, as opposed to trying it or using it recreationally, and there is a difference.
Oh, a huge difference. Anyone, first of all, I can't even sell someone 1,000 milligrams unless I'm in a medical dispensary. You can't go above 100 milligrams in an adult use facility. But the big thing to understand is, like, a lot of people will eat edibles on an empty stomach. They think it's the same rules as alcohol. So alcohol, empty stomach, you feel it more. Cannabis, empty stomach, you feel it less. So in order to feel an edible, you need to have some fat content in your stomach, yogurt, tuna.
We have a question.
Oh, I love questions.
I love questions too. That interaction. We encourage chat.
Yeah.
All right, Dan, since you don't have a microphone on, you're going to have to yell.
Or you can repeat it.
Okay, go ahead.
About what you said earlier.
Yes.
8 times stronger.
Yes.
Someone was wondering if that was dabbing, but you were talking about alcohol. Correct?
Alcohol and cannabis together, correct, is 8 times the effect. So, and it's interesting, if you walk into a bar and you've already partaked, so you're a little buzzed when you walk into a bar, and then you have 1 drink, you're not going to need 2.
Right.
Okay? You're just not. So 1 drink is enough. Now, if you have 1 or 2 drinks and then you go outside and you partake in cannabis, you're going to go to a completely different level.
Right.
And it is 8 times the effect. It's a little bit different. And for those that, like you said, depending on who you are and how much and whatever, I have always kind of found it to be balancing.
Right.
And I know that, I'm not going to sit here and encourage people to get behind the wheel of a car under any influence at all, okay? I am not going to encourage that, okay? But in times when you might, I have always found that I am a far better driver when I am under the influence of cannabis than if I am under the influence of alcohol. Now, you can avoid where I am all you want, knock on wood, the only times I've ever had an accident when I'm completely straight and I'm at either a red light, a stop sign, or I'm yielding. So, just don't hit me when I'm sitting still.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would back up what you were saying about you really need to just be careful when you're combining alcohol and cannabis, right? It's definitely not something to advocate, because you pick one or the other, is what I'd say.
Yeah, exactly, or learn. Go ahead.
And
another question.
Another conversation that sparked in here off of that, they were confused about whether you were talking about alcohol or dabbing. I don't know if you can answer comparatively to actual flower. How strong are the dabs comparatively? Oh,
absolutely. So when we're talking about standard cannabis versus dabbing, right? So traditional flower, you put it in a spoon pipe, you roll it in a joint, traditional flower, versus concentrate cannabis and dabbing. So the joke is, the reason we call it dabbing is because a dab will do you a small, what we sometimes will refer to as half the size of a fingernail.
It's like on the edge of a pin.
Exactly.
Or a paper clip.
The smallest amount that you could basically break off with a paper clip, effectively, yeah. And the reason you're using such a small amount of concentrate is the way we made that concentrate is we took flour and we basically crunched and distilled it down. So there could be, in 1/2 gram of concentrate, there could be 500 milligrams of dose versus if I was looking at that in flower, because again, we use sort of different language to talk about flower. We use THC test percentage, like how much of the plant is THC, that thing that makes us feel stoned.
Yep.
Concentrates, we measure in milligrams. We're still talking about THC in both sides,
right.
But it's so basically, I mean, you're talking 10 to 50 times stronger, right, is like the short answer.
And it's interesting that the first questions we're getting are about, you know, what's the most intense high I can get.
Right.
And this is where I have an issue with underage drinking, because I get scared when I see high school kids binge drinking alcohol. And I had a personal experience with this that I've seen, and back in the day when I was in Portland, Maine, I was covering sports in Portland, Maine, and there was a young man who was a Division I baseball player. He was already accepted to the University of Miami, which, you know, was a beautiful baseball school. It was in the 80s, and I think the coach was Ron Frazier back then. Anyway, he took his Camaro and decided to go crazy and binge drink, and had a up close and personal with a telephone pole, and died.
Yeah.
And the binge drink, I still see binge drinking.
Right.
And I remember talking to high school kids recently about this, and I said, I don't get it. What's the point? He goes, well, what's the point of using it? And I go, well, it's not to get filthy, stupid drunk that you get sick. Your body's going to tell you how much you can or can't do, and I just don't get it. I never liked getting sick, okay? And I found out later in life that I was allergic to hops, so I was never a beer drinker. I would have 3 beers and I would get sick.
Right.
And people are, Young, you can't hold your liquor. I'm like, that's okay, I'll go over here and roll a joint.
Yeah.
But it was 18 back then too.
Right.
And there was more education available amongst us than taught in the schools.
Right.
So that was pretty much how and I've come out of the cannabis closet at this point. I mean, people pretty much know that I'm not, you know. By the way, I don't think I would be with the Pro Cannabis Media Group, and I wouldn't have been the founder of either my mom or my dad were alive. They are not. Okay? So I just want to say I'm going to get that out there. That being said, it's been part of my world since I was 14. I did take 10 years off completely. Mm-hmm. When my son was born, I was 32 at the time. I got my job in Boston at NECN during that time, when I worked with Mike Adams, who is also someone who has come out of the cannabis closet, so to speak, over the years. Still one of the funniest guys I've ever met, and a guy I worked with for many, many years. And but it was really interesting that he was the one that got busted one night at the car wash in Connecticut at 2:30 in the morning for, you know, he was commuting from Connecticut to Newton, Mass every day.
Wow.
An hour and a half, an hour 45 minutes each. I mean, so anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
That's what I do here. We're talking with Andrew Elk, and we're talking about how all sorts of different things going on in the world of cannabis. Now, one thing that we haven't touched on in this show on a somewhat regular basis, and I do feel remiss that I have not had a grow show. Mm-hmm. I definitely have reached out to growers. I encourage people to send me their grow images, because people like to look at the pretty pictures. I'm going to pick this up now. This is the Revolutionary Clinics wholesale catalog.
Yes, it is.
That has some absolutely beautiful images of beautiful flower in it. I'm holding it up.
Oh my God!
This is, I feel like I should be Johnny Carson, and I'm over there. Okay, that's good. Anyway, you can kind of see how beautiful these flowers are. There's one in the monitor too.
Yeah.
Oh, are you going to try and do something? Oh, look what he's doing.
Oh, I love it.
So he's screen capturing part of this image.
Yeah.
And he's going to punch it up. This is Dan French at his best. He's having so much fun directing this show. I know he is. Do you want it? Hold it still. He's got it. He's getting it closer, closer. It's kind of weird, I know.
But those are gorgeous.
Now, this comes out you have a plant in Fitchburg,
That's
right?
correct. That is where our facility is.
And how big a facility is it? Do you know?
I think it's 1 million square feet. It is a former LL Bean shoe factory. So it's a big horseshoe. We've got 2/3 of the horseshoe, and the third part of the horseshoe is a retirement home. That's a riot. Oh yeah, it's a bunch of retirees living next to a pot factory. It's really funny.
Now, one of the things that's come out in the news recently is in Washington State, some of the outdoor farms have a smell issue, because after all, it's a very pungent odor.
Right.
So are the senior citizens in the retirement home, so to speak, my brethren, almost, are they, do they complain about it? Do they like, at this point, I'm guessing they're comfortable smelling it.
At this point, I think they're very comfortable. And I think that,
Can I put this down, Dan? Because I'm getting a cramp. Okay.
No, smell is not really an issue at our factory. We've got about 3 layers between the outside and where the actual cannabis is. You've got the brick exterior, you've got several layers of sort of airtight, because we're really trying to stop pollen from coming in, right?
No, you don't want pollen on your flower.
Right. Like you, for example, walking in for a tour could be carrying some pollen on your jacket. So we've got all this technology, these air blowers that basically, these sticky mats that you walk over to basically keep everything. But yeah, when you talk about like the most secure part of our whole business, it's really a building inside a building inside a building.
Right. And I've talked to growers before, and they won't let me go in with a camera or whatever because, it's super secret probation.
It's Wonka's Chocolate Factory.
Right. Absolutely. Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory. And the golden ticket is you got to know someone to get in.
Exactly.
And I have seen a picture actually of Tom and Keith in the grow facility. In fact, if we have that B-roll, Dan has a B-roll, some images that I put together of interiors of the Somerville and Fresh Pond locations. And also the famous picture, I think it's a globe picture. I probably ripped it off, and I'll probably get in trouble for it, but whatever. I beg for forgiveness anyway. Of Keith and Tom in that grow facility. You know the
yes,
picture.
I know the picture.
You know the picture.
It's on a plaque in our office.
Oh, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. They both have very large grins on their faces.
Oh, yeah.
And this is the interior, and there's now an ex-employee of yours who I adored, the Canna Queen herself.
Yes.
And there's Keith. And Deirdre's on the far left, and it was Deirdre who's the good friend.
There's our Central Square store.
There's your Central Square location, and there it is. There's the photo.
The famous picture.
Yeah, I guess they weren't really grinning. They were very serious there. But
it's a great photo.
And there's Black Mamba. There's one of your flowers.
That's what I used to fall asleep just last night. I love Black Mamba.
So obviously you're a connoisseur. You're someone who has a taste and understands it all. Can you really tell, I know wine drinkers, right? And they taste the wine, right? And they say, oh, I smell wood or blackberry or something, right? And I'm like, I taste red wine. I don't have that discerning palate, as it were.
Right.
How do you create a palate for cannabis?
So,
and don't say lots of practice, okay?
I would say it's quality is a huge part of it. There is higher and lower quality flower production, and some of that is what soil you grow in, whether you use soil at all, the conditions of the growing. Just like you can have high quality tomatoes grown on the vine or low quality tomatoes. The big thing is understanding, like test percentage is what a lot of people shoot for as the standard for success, right? If you have a high THC test percentage, used to be that 25 was the be-all end-all, now 35 was the be-all end-all, and now they're a high, basically, you go back to the 60s, we're talking about 6% THC, that's what the Beatles were smoking.
Yes, it was.
And people say, oh, this isn't
Do you know
the
who
stuff.
gave the Beatles their first weed?
Who
you don't know this?
No, I don't.
I found this out, I'm trying to remember who told me this, but it was Bob Dylan. Who told me?
David Beatonstock.
David Beatonstock from the greatest moments in weed history. And I knew the answer, but I couldn't play. I said, as soon as you say the name, I'm going to know it.
Yeah.
It's Bob Dylan. I said, isn't it Robert Zimmerman? Isn't that his real name? Anyway.
No. But that's one standard that people shoot for. But a lot of it has to do with plant structure. Is it frosty? There are a lot of criteria that people look for in cannabis. Is it the right shape? Does it have sort of this frosty, trichomed exterior? So there are things I can taste and I can appreciate really high quality stuff. Like our Black Mamba, our last couple batches of Bootylicious. There are some really special strains in the Rev Clinics lineup. And there's also just cannabis. There's just weed. There's stuff that you just smoke.
Which is kind of like how I feel about red wine. And it's just, it is what it is. It has a different effect. I've always liked hash, which is compressed, right?
A concentrate form. One of the first concentrates before anybody was making this fancy wax shatter, rosin, batter, butter.
Right. And I admitted it was for choice, let's just say, back in the day, in the 60s and 70s. 70s definitely, not the 71. I'm not afraid of that. It happens to coincide when the Waldos used to get together.
Right.
It's just a coincidence, as they say. You use the word trichome.
Yes, trichome.
One of the things I like to do on this show, because of the vernacular, everybody seems to have different buzzwords, terpenes, and
Right.
trichomes.
Right.
Can you define what a trichome is?
Certainly. So a trichome is that when you look at a cannabis nug or a bud or a bit of flower, and you see that characteristic sort of sugar crystal, it almost looks like a frosting of sugar across the texture of the plant.
Yeah.
So those are individual little sacs filled with terpenes and cannabinoids. So when we're extracting, when we're making a cannabis concentrate, we're basically separating plant material from those little sugar crystals. It's inside those sugar crystals that we have our THC, our CBD, all of our special cannabinoids that make us feel good.
Yeah.
And then terpenes, which are flavor and have their own sort of medicinal effects.
Man, this business has gotten really complicated, and you
Right.
need a chemistry degree just to go out and find some decent flower.
Right.
Right. Some decent bud.
Right.
And you don't need a clipboard or an album cover. Back in the day, you don't even know what albums are, do you?
Of course I know what albums are.
Thank God. My God, albums.
But yeah.
Well, but that was the thing. Now, terpenes.
Terpenes.
Terpenes are the steering mechanisms.
So terpenes are the aromatic smell chemicals that are common to cannabis and all kinds of botanical plants. So common example, the most common terpene in cannabis is myrcene. It's a muscle relaxant.
Yep.
Myrcene is in mangoes. Myrcene is in all kinds of fruits.
Mm-hmm.
And myrcene, if you basically take myrcene in its raw form, if you give it to a sumo wrestler, if you give it to a boa constrictor, if you give it to a 16-year-old girl, it does the same thing to every one of those people. It relaxes their muscles.
Okay.
So we associate myrcene with the indica family of flower strains, the relaxers, the
Right.
body focus strains. And for a long time people thought, oh, this is an indica strain, it's an indica flower. They didn't really know what it meant. I mean, we're talking about plant genetics right now. So it's an indica strain, that's why it makes me sleepy. Well, actually what we're starting to understand is there's inside that indica, there's myrcene, there's terpinolene, there's citronine, there are all these different terpenes, but there are terpenes like pinene, famous terpene, it's an upper, makes you feel energized and awake.
Okay.
Pinene is in pine sap. Limonene is in lemon peel. So there are certain aromatic chemicals that when you put them together with THC, they do specific things.
Yeah.
So when I have myrcene in an indica strain, I feel relaxed because my body's processing a muscle relaxant.
Right.
Versus when I'm smoking sativa flower and I'm processing citronine or limonene, that's an upper, at the chemical level.
Right.
So we're just now beginning to understand, why do sativas for many people have these common side effects? Why do indicas for this common group of people have many of the same effects? But terpenes are basically aroma and effect.
Gotcha. And that's fascinating. Can I ask you, where did you get to be so smart? You grew up in Lexington.
Yes,
I mean,
little suburb boy.
Yeah, suburb boy.
Someone just said this guy knows his shit.
Yes, he does. He knows shit and it's
Thank
pretty
you.
good shit too, I guess.
But yeah, I learned really from working in the cannabis industry. So I think decriminalization was passed 2017 in Massachusetts. We had medical cannabis since
2013.
2013. We didn't have decriminalization until January 1st, 2017.
Right.
I applied for my first cannabis job, I think January 2nd, 2017.
So, but I mean, again, I get it. You enjoyed it. You are fascinated by it. You've read up about it.
Yeah.
There are so many schools out there now. There's online courses. Everybody's teaching an online course. And I believe as an educator, pretty much everybody has something to teach everyone else, whether it is in cannabis or sports or communication or PR or recruitment, whatever it is. Especially as you get older, you have a certain expertise in how you got to be older.
Right.
So sharing that with others is something that I believe in. But you're relatively young, and I'm amazed at the depth of your knowledge. I really am. But you didn't go to school for this.
No. Really, all of my education came from having watching a lot of YouTube videos.
Okay, so which ones I'm interested to hear which ones, because I too, when I got my medical card in 2013, I went online and I found Green Flower.
Right.
And Max Simon. And in fact, Max and I are he's going to come on the show, which I don't think I even told Isabel yet, but he is, which is great. He's the founder of Green Flower. And I loved their videos because they were so educational, and they had a lot of PhDs and doctors from California, and they basically just brought them in and let them talk about different things. And I learned so much until YouTube took them down. Did you know that?
Oh yeah, well YouTube, Instagram, a lot of these platforms, they don't like cannabis.
No, they
sometimes
don't.
they do and sometimes they don't.
No, and we're finding that out ourselves, let's just say. But here we are talking about educating people and using it the right way, responsibly. It's an adult product, okay? And I really make that very clear. A lot of people want me to hire interns. And I go, well, first of all, interns have to be 21 as far as I'm concerned if they want to work with us here, because I don't want to have to deal with under 21-year-olds. I just don't. It just doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Aren't you glad you turned 21, Dan? He's not an intern anymore. It is, he's a professional director.
Right, but it's an adult business, like you said.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. And we're getting up to the top of the hour, so we're going to take a little break. Speaking of education, we have at our disposal, if you will, from our friends at Cannabis.net, a series of video tutorials on a variety of subjects, and I never know what the subject is. Dan gets to kind of pick them. So we're going to run a couple of these Cannabis.net videos, and then we'll come back on the other side. And we've got a few more treats to talk about, so don't go away. Cannabis Chat continues after this. Of course it is. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Cannabis Chat. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. This is Professor Weed Wednesdays. Andrew Elk is in studio from Revolutionary Clinics. He's the director of training and education for the medical dispensary, that my go-to place to go to. And I appreciate you coming in. And as you are hearing, we actually have a more active chat room today than we've had, which is great. Because if anybody's in marketing, they understand it's providing content with the audience and then engaging with that audience. That's the interactivity that is eventually, we call it second screen content a lot of times. Because if you're watching TV, for the most part, especially people your age, you got your phone right there.
Guilty.
Right? And you're either texting someone who's watching the same game or the same show of you, or you're multitasking. Your generation just absorbs and wants to multitask.
There's so much to do.
And so little time. Right. So first of all, thank you for engaging with our audience, because I really do believe that's what we want this show to become. And we want to take people's questions for our guests. We also asking all of the people that are chatting to please subscribe to our channel, because we're trying to reach the 50 plateau.
Right.
And we're 16 people away. Again, we've only been doing this for a couple of weeks, right? How many? 8. We're 8 away. 8 away.
We need 8 more.
We need 8 more people to just subscribe, okay? And I don't even care if you unsubscribe later, as long as we reach that plateau. No, again, please subscribe and watch this, because on Fridays, if you're interested in getting into the cannabis business, David Rabinovitz, who you probably have never met, but he's the treasurer of MassCan, and is someone who's a data analyst. So he'll look at the public documents that the Cannabis Commission comes out with and are available, and he'll analyze them and look at the different licenses, and then look at the cost per customer, and kind of figure out where the industry is going. And he has been, I know that he's been engaged with a lot of people that are looking for that sort of thing. So he's somebody I consider to be an expert on any data.
Right.
And now he is fascinated by the cannabis space, because there's so many elements and so many factors to what's going on here. And I think that's one of the reasons why you got so involved with the industry, because you found different aspects of it fascinating. Correct?
Oh, incredibly true. And
what do you like the most, though?
My favorite thing is that in the cannabis industry, everything we're doing for the first time, pretty much.
Right.
We are paving the road. We are sometimes literally laying foundation.
A talk show about cannabis.
Yeah.
Hello. Right.
And, but again, like opening a store, like a brick and mortar store.
What goes into that?
That's been done before.
Right.
Like hosting a show, that's been done before.
Right.
But everything we're doing here, now, tomorrow, last week, in the cannabis is new. Pretty much. They're people from different backgrounds. Like I was in theater management before I was doing this job, Mostly I had 400, 500 people a night come into a theater to see a live show.
Cool.
Very different business. It's been around for a long time. Those job roles are set, like how you do it has been written down by someone else. Whereas with cannabis, you're writing the roadmap every day.
And you do feel you're part of a historic movement, there's no doubt. And the fact that it's part of in the middle of the political mess that is Washington, D.C., the fact that Republicans are counting the word cannabis in a COVID relief bill, is, first of all, it drives me nuts to even think that that's an issue.
Right.
Okay? And second, all the Democrats are trying to do is open the banks so that those who are in the industry can actually have a bank account. Is that so bad?
Oh, it's ridiculous.
I mean, goodness gracious. I mean,
we pay enough in taxes, certainly.
Well, some of us do.
Yeah.
Some of us don't pay taxes, no matter how much money we make.
Right.
I just want to say.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say who.
Right.
Okay.
But cannabis could, I think you were pointing to, cannabis taxes can pay for a lot of things in a state. There's a lot of money being left on the table.
And for 30, 40 years,
Yeah.
I used to say, why don't they just legalize this stuff and tax the shit out of it?
Right.
And they finally did. They finally listened to me, which is great. I mean, I'm into that. But
we're in an enlightened state here.
Yeah, well, Massachusetts has always been, and after all, it began here. Everybody has to remember that. Amazingly, we have a lot of listeners and downloaders in Colorado and in California, because right now I don't think there's too many talk shows out there, even in the mature markets. All right, it is something God gave me, a gift of gab, and I have managed to make somewhat of a career of it over the last 40 years. I mean, it used to be sports, but really and truly, even I got tired of talking about sports. Okay, I'll never get tired about talking about this because I learned so much from people like you, or from the science directors, or from Keith Cooper, your CEO, who, you know, I would absolutely work for because I really like his management style and who he is and how he is.
Amazing manager and amazing boss.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I feel the same way. Every day I learn something new about cannabis or about my industry.
Right, or the business, or dealing with people. There's so many elements to it, and of course the science is
navigating
just
the
crazy.
laws.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I know what we have. We have another video, okay? And I'm pretty sure there is sound on this, but I think it's just music. It was sent to me by Tom Schneider, and it was sent to me from the Fitchburg facility because it's called Harvest. And I think you'll understand why it's called Harvest when you check out this video. Play it, Dan. Okay, so that's a sneak inside the grow facility. And of course, while we're watching that, Andrew's narrating, yeah, this is what they're doing now. This is what they're doing now. So they harvest, and then they dry it by turning it upside down and hanging it.
Correct.
I did notice a lot of clipping of the leaves.
Right.
And we were talking about the leaves. And I know people who I talk to at cannabis shows that juice the leaves, mix it with carrot juice, and of course, it, you know, whatever it cures, it cures. I mean,
so what we're talking about is sugar leaf, right?
Sugar leaf.
So sugar leaf is the common name for sort of those big, beautiful, like iconic fan leaves that when people think cannabis, when you think the pot leaf shape, that's the leaves that we're talking about.
Right. The
big palm fronds, almost.
Yeah.
But so those are enormously chock full of what we call minor cannabinoids. Basically, not THC, not the stuff that gets us stoned, not the stuff that most people are paying for or buying.
Yep.
So really, we don't use sugar leaf in any of the products that we manufacture just because we have such a THC, CBD, medically psychoactive focus.
Right.
But there's, like I said, so you've got you do have CBD in sugar leaf. You have CBG, which is incredible for stomach issues, menstrual cramps. If you've got CBC, is incredibly antifungal. So there are a myriad of medical benefits.
And if you are a medical patient and you get your flower in a canister and they break down the cannabinoids on every label.
Yes.
And, you know,
by law,
I understand that. But there's a lot of zeros and a lot next to a lot of those CBGs and CBCs and
I'm happy to talk about that.
CBS and all them. Yeah.
So like when you've got a really high quality strain, you might have 25% THC on that label. That might be considered above average or average today. If you're cracking 30%, you've got something really special when it comes to THC. All those other cannabinoids, CBD amongst them, CBD, CBG, CBN, they do other things besides get us high. They help with pain, they put us to sleep, they're good for controlling seizures. But the reason they have 0.0% sometimes, or 0.01 or low percentage, well, you have to understand that since the 50s, since as long as people have been growing cannabis, as long as there's been a black market.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, they've been using it for thousands of years.
Exactly. But for as long as anyone has been marketing it, growing it purposefully, selling it to an end user, the only cannabinoid people cared about on the black market was THC.
Okay, so does it get you high or not?
It's like, so you had years, decades of purposeful crossbreeding to get really high test percentages for THC. But it's only within the last 5 to 10 years that anyone even knew what CBD was.
Yep. Let me ask you a question about that, because, when politicians get involved, they're already talking, I think, in California, about limiting the percentage of THC in the plant. Now, I know alcohol, when you have something that is 100 proof,
right,
that is pure alcohol.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Are we ever going to see that day that the percentages of THC will be governed? Again, alcohol has been around since a long time.
Right.
As I've mentioned many times, I wrote a blog way back when I first started this, that the wrong drug in 1937 was outlawed, because I really do believe that if cannabis was part of our society and accepted since 1937, you took a balancing an immune system builder out of the medicine world. Okay, and what happened? We got riddled by cancer.
Right.
And a million other things.
Pain management, you think about where we would be.
100%. And a lot of oncologists, I've thrown this theory out, and they actually think that I'm onto something, that whatever that means. It's just common sense, because I find out that in the 1920s, 3 million prescriptions by MDs, medical doctors, people who went to Harvard Medical School in the turn of the century, the 20th century, they wrote 3 million prescriptions for cannabis in the 1920s, okay? And now you take that out of the human, away from mammals, because we didn't get into the whole pet thing, right?
Right, right.
Of course our immune systems are going to be compromised. Of course we're going to be susceptible to the chemicals that we've put into our environment, because our immune systems are beat to hell.
Right, right. So to answer your question about will we ever reach that point where
yes,
we're like,
will we ever reach that point? It's good that you remembered my question.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I appreciate that.
So the way to think about it is, imagine if you have like 1 nug, 1 gram of flower. Imagine you got one big honkin' nug that's 1 gram.
Yep.
Let's say it's 30% THC. Okay. What that means is that, remember those sugar crystals, those trichomes, remember that's where the THC lives?
Yeah.
That means if we ignore all the green on the plant, all the leaves, we forget about all of that, 30% of the weight of that 1 gram of nug is THC. It lives in those sugar crystals. That's what a 30% THC means. That's because,
and that means that even, so correct me if I'm wrong, if you get something that is 14% THC, it will still get you high.
Oh, 100%. And in fact, test percentage is not the be-all, end-all remotely. Right. Like, I have had strains that test at 12, 11, 14%, and have them hit me way harder, because some people go by test percentage, but really it's the combination of test percentage, terpenes, your own body chemistry, your experience with that strain. And that's the science as we understand it today. But again, it's an evolving science.
Oh, it's evolving because they're discovering new cannabinoids every day.
Right.
Which is just, again, I never took chemistry. I never did. My science requirement ended up being astronomy. What can I tell you? I was a liberal arts student in the 70s. Anyway, well, I'm glad that we were able to show that as well, because I really am fascinated with the grow part of this, and the fact that they can dictate the DNA of the different plant strains is amazing to me. We'll get into the whole extraction process when Lisa joins us in about 10 minutes or so, or 13 minutes? 13 minutes, just to be exact. And all that will be happening, coming up as well. Oh, you know what? I got something that we haven't played yet, and this is something I don't think you've seen. But Rev Clinics has been the sponsor of my podcast, In the Weeds, since the beginning. Okay, and that was in 2018, April or May 2018, something like that. Oh, wait.
That's since before I joined.
Wait, this is live TV. I love that. Okay, the monitor goes to sleep and I get to wake it up. Anyway, we put a promotional video. Now, it's really, really important that we say this, that I say this as a disclaimer, okay? When you are putting a message out there, it's very important, according to all the regulations, to not have a call to action, because it is not a commercial. It is not a pitch.
Right.
What it is an infomercial. It's an informational piece of video that tells a story. So this is the infomercial that I put together for Rev Clinics over the last year or two, and we've played hundreds of times. And for those of you who are tuning in perhaps for the first time, you probably haven't seen it, but for those of you who have seen it, like 2 people in this room have seen it probably 100 times, just bear with us. But let's take a look at the Rev Clinics spot, if you will.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of pro-cannabis media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
And I should probably give Tony Simonetti, who's my ace After Effects editor, credit for that. We call it a stinger. And you liked it.
I loved it. I had never seen that before, but I really liked it.
Good. Well, that was my idea, and he implemented it because I said, you know, it looks like paint swishing, just make it move.
Yeah.
And that was
I love it.
What happens. All right, so that was the commercial for our friends at, the infomercial. And you didn't hear me talk. I said the patient comes first. It's a medical dispensary. It's a no-brainer.
Exactly.
Right?
Really straightforward.
And you guys always talk about education first anyway. And and that's what drew me in anyway, and I'm very, very happy with my relationship with you guys over the years. Have you seen the show Growing Belushi?
Growing Belushi.
Now, you know who Jim Belushi is?
I do. I've heard of Jim Belushi. I know Jim Belushi.
You know his brother was John Belushi?
You're right, from the Blues Brothers.
Correct. All right, good. This is good. So you have some knowledge of the Belushi family, if you will.
Right.
Jim, very successful actor, comedian.
Right.
Been in a bunch of movies. And he has a farm in Oregon, and he grows cannabis. And he pitched the show to the Discovery Channel and got it accepted. They did 3 episodes. And if you have not seen them, they are available on YouTube. You can also get them on demand through Discovery Channel or whatever. Right. You guys are young. You know how to find all that stuff.
We'll find it.
You find it. It is a riot. It's very cleverly written. You know, it's kind of a reality wink-wink show. Okay? It's a scripted reality show is really how I would look at this. And his cousin Clark is absolutely he makes the show. And even Jim admits this, which is kind of cool. Wow. And they also introduce you to Captain Jack Strain. Captain Jack Strain was what the original cast members at Saturday Night Live in the 70s, because Captain Jack was their dealer.
Wow, that's perfect. That's beautiful.
So you have to watch this show now.
Absolutely.
And you know, it's 3 45-minute episodes, and the trip to Medellin, Colombia, is absolutely priceless.
Wow.
Dan Aykroyd is in this.
Right.
Judy Belushi, John's widow, is in this show as well.
Wow.
And you know, I'm really hopeful that we get Jim. I doubt I'll get him in studio, but getting him on a Zoom call is probably something I'm pretty comfortable that we're going to get. We talked to his publicist, and
nice.
You know, they're pitching this now. I hope they do a whole season because it's a riot.
Oh God, yeah.
And what it does more than anything else, Andrew, that I really like is they talk about education. He talks about normalizing this crop, and he's a businessman. He's a farmer.
Right.
And what is he doing now? You know, 7 farms in Oregon got destroyed by the fires.
Right. Heartbreaking.
So now he's got, if you go on United Way and you go to the Oregon division of the United Way, you can donate to help out. And he's, you know, pushing this. And we talked about it on our We Talk News show a couple weeks ago. And but we have one more clip to play before we go to the interview. And he calls it Cannabis 101.
I love it.
And it's Jim Belushi playing the role of Professor Weed.
That's perfect.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that's where I kind of got the idea of Professor Weed Wednesdays, because there's no original thought in creative content anymore. But we have this, Dan, ready to go? All right, let's take a look at Professor Weed Belushi.
do you say you don't like to smoke? Got so high in high school in 1975. With edibles, you can control your experience. I want a controlled experience. He wants a controlled experience. Edibles are gummies, chocolate, cookies, brownies. But don't ever take a cookie and a brownie from a friend because the dosage is not controlled. Go to a legal, registered recreational dispensary. Dosage! You get a 100 milligram candy bar. This is my favorite chocolate. Bang chocolate. Childproof. Unless your kid can wield a hammer, don't worry about it. Here is 100 milligrams. Way too much. You break it down, it's scored. Most people like a 5 milligram dosage because it's like a warm hug. Start slow and wait. Don't eat an edible in 10 minutes later go, I don't feel nothing, I'm gonna need some more. Next thing you know, you're gonna be on the couch or steering wheel in the parking lot. Make plans to stay home and watch a movie with your lover, your wife, or both.
That was Professor Weed, and that's the first time you've seen Jim Belushi doing his thing.
First time I'd seen him doing that. That was hysterical.
Hysterical, and yet educational.
Incredibly.
Which is the way this product should be shared with others. One of my biggest beefs is the Cannabis Control Commission in Massachusetts has a $250,000 budget to produce these PSAs to enlighten people about cannabis. And they are so condescending, so insulting. They're just not good. And I keep saying, you know, if anybody ever wants to share this with the group, I'd be happy to work because that's how you should be doing it.
Right. Normalizing.
Normalizing it, 100%. You know how much information you got out of there? Start low and go slow. Childproof packaging was part of that. Don't take too much or you'll get goofy. I mean,
figuring out your dose.
Figure out your dose. I mean, and then he holds up the Bang chocolate.
Yeah.
Now, courtesy of my pal Isabella in the other room, we got to talk with their CEO, Jamie Pearson. And I didn't know that Belushi was going to have this show. So after I interviewed her, she says, you know, I'm friendly with Jim Belushi. And I went, oh, I love Jim Belushi. You know, he's got a show coming out. I said, no, I didn't know that. Next thing I know, it's Growing Belushi. And that's how it all kind of came about. And of course, he just plugged. You talk about product placement.
Yeah.
Perfect. You get a celebrity endorser, product placement, and Bang Chocolate is not in Massachusetts, and it's the #1 chocolate edible in Canada.
I believe it.
And
wow.
She told me the story. It was a gourmet chocolatier that she knew, and they just went into business together. And 10 years they've been in business in California, you know, killing it. And now they're up in Canada doing
It's amazing how many chefs and growers, chemists, scientists have come to the cannabis industry either for quality of life, for new opportunities to sort of make their own path, to sort of come up on their own, or to bring the expertise that made them really fantastic in their own industry.
Right, absolutely. And again, this is what being part of this industry really is all about, is finding those interesting stories. And we want to be able to tell those stories. That's why I started this Pro Cannabis Media Group, and that's why I like doing these interviews and doing the shows, and it all started with the podcast, In the Weeds, courtesy of our friends at Rev Clinics. So you can blame me or blame them, whoever you want to blame.
I love it.
But I'm not a big blamer, okay, because I don't believe in that. I do want to set up the Lisa Zwirner interview a little bit. The Cleveland School of Cannabis is located in Cleveland and Columbus, Ohio. Certain states like Ohio, Oklahoma, only medical program.
Right.
But very much a part of the fabric now of each state's society.
Right.
They're vibrant. In Oklahoma, I think if you show up and you ask for a license, you get a license. I think it's
That's great.
It's that easy, right? They gave out something like 800 licenses in the first year.
Wow.
That's going to cause a problem too.
Right.
You know, but it also is the polar opposite of how Massachusetts started their adult use recreational program, which has moved at a snail's pace.
Right.
And it's been controlled.
Right.
And it's been shut down by the governor during COVID as the only state doing that. But there, oh, look at that. She's got the right background and everything. I'll tell you, that's what you want. Oh, she's smiling, which means I think she can hear me, right? Is that right?
Perfect.
She can hear me. All right, that's great. Let's bring in Lisa Zwirner, the Director of Education for the Cleveland School of Cannabis. Hi, Lisa. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Jimmy.
Oh, no, this is the perfect end to an amazing program because Andrew Elk is with us. He's a Director of Education and Training for a medical dispensary in the greater Boston area. And we've been getting an education on trichomes and terpenes and the grow, but we've kind of left the extraction process to you because you and I talked yesterday or the day before about this. Can you please explain the courses of study at the Cleveland School of Cannabis and your expertise in extraction and why that's so important?
Sure, thank you. The courses of study, we have 6 different majors, which would be anything from horticulture with cultivation, business dispensary, the medical side, as well as processing, post-processing, and industrial hemp. So that is, and we also have an executive major, which is kind of a combination of all of those. So that would kind of be your master's in education of cannabis. And the extraction, do you want me to just kind of review what I review in a class, kind of the basics?
Absolutely. Let's talk curriculum.
We cover everything from the basic method of extractions, which would be your mechanical extractions. And those type of extractions would be anything from like dry sift to bubble hash to rosin pressing. And then we get into more commercialized methods, which would be more of your ethanol and your butane washes, as well as your CO2. And that's where you get a lot of your vape pens and other types of concentrates from, as well as a little bit of infusions for oils and fats that we use for our edibles. So we really give them an overall view in the first course about all the types of extractions. And then we get into a much more in-depth course with processing and post-processing on the commercial level.
There you go. I mean, to me, I'm fascinated by every aspect. You know, they have the horticulture, obviously, history, legal, retail, activism, patient access, the whole 9 yards. This is not your average grow certificate course. This is legit. I don't even want to call it legitimate because everybody has something to teach everybody else. But you're going to college when you go to the Cleveland School of Cannabis, correct, Lisa?
Yes, we are a state accredited institution. So you will be getting a certificate of completion at the end, as well as job placement. We take this seriously. So we take the student from the beginning in education and then try to get them placed into an Ohio facility. And now we're branching out into the U.S. with our online program.
There you go.
That's incredible.
It is. I told you. And this guy, Andrew, he is self-taught through various YouTube videos, and I'm amazed at the depth of his knowledge in this space. So I think what we have here is we have a college accredited program, and then we have the street cred, if you will.
Right.
And there's still so much to be learned at so many different levels. And, you know, again, I'm fascinated with the science behind it, Lisa. Can you walk us through the word decarboxylation? I get to say it. You know, we kind of goofed about that a little bit. But this is the process that you're able to take a flower and then extract the chemicals from the flower, correct?
Yeah, so decarboxylation actually is where you are taking the compounds from the flower, which are THCA, CBDA, CBN, you know, those products from the flower. And what you do through heat, oxidation, light, There's different forms that you can actually decarboxylate the compounds, and it takes off that carboxyl group, that acid group, which is that A on the end, and turns it into a form like THC and CBD. So it drops the A off. Now it is the THC is euphoric, where THCA is not. And that just to think from the layman's terms, when you are physically rolling a joint with flower that has THCA and CBDA in it, you have to light it, you have to heat it for those compounds to accelerate into a form that gives you the euphoria or medicinal properties that you need. And that's what decarboxylation is. So when you take decarboxylation in different forms, let's say for edibles, we're not lighting that up or we're not vaporizing that. So you have to actually heat that yourself. So you would actually grind up that cannabis and you would put it into an oven for, approximately an hour at 250, 240. And then you have activated the flower, and it is now ready to be put into your oils or fats to be delivered into your recipes. So that is what decarboxylation is. It's just activating the compounds that are already in the flower, but they are in an acidic form.
Wow, fantastically explained. I love that. Lisa, how in the world did you end up in the cannabis industry? I ask this a lot to people. I still shake my head and go, I have a talk show about cannabis? How did this happen? So
Sure.
How did you get to be where you are, and what's your story, Lisa?
Sure. Well, I actually started out with some family members that was trying to get off, or not necessarily get off, but have back off of some medications that were giving them side effects. And so I first started out growing, and like your other guests there, I watched some YouTube videos, and that's at the time, back then when I started, it was the only available source. You might be able to go buy, a book, but you were definitely worried somebody was following you out and following you home when you bought that book. So we went to the YouTube and we started watching some different growers, show you the beginnings and basics. And the first time you buy seeds for $100 and you try to sprout them, you're so afraid that, all that money is going to go down the drain if you don't do it right. So I watched a lot of videos. Then I moved into, once I got that growing down and was able to provide the medicine for my family, I learned about extractions. And again, I started on a social media platform on YouTube with Hash Church, which some people may be familiar with. It was with Marcus Richardson, and he is also BC Bubble Man, owns bubble bags. And he started an educational show about extraction. And so I started watching that every Sunday, got to meet him, had incredible conversations, became the moderator of the show, started, listening 4 hours every Sunday. So I had probably, I can't even imagine how many thousands of hours of cannabis education that I was receiving from that. And so that is what put me in a place to actually be able to teach extractions. I did it myself, I taught myself, but I also had a lot of mentorship through that. And then I started, with my own product. And I then started out breeding and got into the breeding business. And I have my own cultivar out there called Mama's Chili Bomb. I got that actually on the shelves, and right now LPs in Canada now are dispensing that medication to Canadian patients, and hopefully someday here in the US. And we, basically got out of that and got into Ohio, because at the time I wasn't living in Ohio when all that was going on. And then I started into the education business. And that to me gave me so much joy to be able to give back what I was able to receive.
That is why teachers do what they do. You know, you're definitely. I think you're doing God's work for sure. No doubt about that. And it sounds fascinating on so many levels. I do want to go back to some of the courses of study at the Cleveland School, and one of the things you mentioned, and when I talked to Kevin Green, he brought this up as well. 70% of your graduates get placed into the industry. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is accurate. So we tried to develop relationships with all of the cannabis industry within Ohio. And of course, it's very difficult to find employees that have education in cannabis. So that is something that obviously, you know, they're looking for. It's a much smaller training program when you can, actually have someone that's gone through our courses. So we started, within the last couple years developing those relationships, and now we get calls constantly. You know, we need 10 people. So we're trying to churn them out as fast as we can to be able to provide the industry with the needs that they have.
So Andrew, you're at a medical dispensary.
Yes.
What's the process? What do you look for? And I don't know if you're involved in the hiring process. Do you ever?
More than you'd think.
Okay, good. So have you ever seen anyone come across your desk with a Cleveland School of Cannabis diploma or anything like that?
No, I haven't. I remember when I was starting out, pretty much the same situation. YouTube was about the only thing out there. I did a lot of research looking for either certificate programs, degree programs. At the time, there was nothing.
Right.
So my cannabis knowledge really came from a combination of YouTube videos and 3 years in the industry.
Right.
But it's interesting. So at Revolutionary Clinics, we're often first looking for customer service skills as well, because we figure we can teach people cannabis. Is the idea, as it's clear from like educational content that I do, that the Cleveland School is doing, is you can make cannabis education. So for us, it's usually, but you're right, we want to hire people who know cannabis. Like Rev Clinics, we want to have the best customer service, so we're usually looking for hires that either have cannabis industry experience, or we would prefer them have customer service and then train them on cannabis. Because for us, they're going to be starting out as a team member, working with other team members. You know, there are all kinds of different jobs in the cannabis industry. Some that need more cannabis knowledge, some that are very customer facing, where you need that knowledge. Others in the kitchen or in extraction, where again, that knowledge is critical. Can't do the job if you don't know how to extract, for example.
And Lisa, you are braver than I am when it comes to the seeds, okay? Because I really do think I have a black thumb. I don't want to be responsible for growing something and then having it die. I'm a very sensitive guy. I just don't think I could handle that. Not to mention the pressure to actually see it sprout and then go to flower, which is why I'm really encouraging people. I want to see the grows. I want you to send me grow footage. I want to see the images of these beautiful flowers that people are growing. Is there any kind of a research component in the curriculum as far as you guys doing any studies or anything like that?
We actually have a course called Cannabis Research Study. So we teach them not only about the research that has taken place, but how to go about researching. So yes, we do offer that. And it's funny when you said you had a black thumb and you couldn't imagine, doing that. I laughed because I felt that way, but wait until you have to take an entire plant and plunge it into water and wash it. That's for the first time. That's scary because you can run an entire plant pretty quickly if you don't know what you're doing. So, the education is absolutely important. And when he was discussing the dispensary side, we have a dispensary operations class, and we just had today what we call a mock dispensary presentation, where we have, faculty and or other students come in and pretend to be the patient. And, we have the menu up, and, each one of the students has to actually find out about, actually go through the process, get their driver's license, scan their card and just go through an entire process of what it would be like to work in the dispensary, and then what it's like to find the conditions, their financial situation, and try to match up all of their needs with what medicine is available, and then asking the right questions. So it's just so imperative to be able to teach that to someone, so that when you do go to a dispensary as a patient who doesn't have that background, when you walk in, you feel like you're speaking to an expert. You feel like you will come back time and time again because what they're recommending is working for you. So it's so important to have those kind of dispensary associates that would be able to educate not just the patients, but the public. And let's try to get some of this prohibition mentality gone and make it more of a medicinal type of a plant now.
Yeah, and absolutely. And that's always been the most frustrating thing for me too, is, and I do preach it on this show on a regular basis, that you are self-medicating with a plant. Now, God put this plant on the earth for a reason, and it's been used for thousands of years by medicine men, by Harvard-educated doctors, and now we're finally doing the type of research that I believe should have been done for years and years and years. You still fight the stigma, don't you? Because I can kind of hear it in the background of some of your stories. Now you're smiling. How challenging is it in the state of Ohio to be accepted as an educator of people who are learning about cannabis? Do you get the eyes roll up when you talk to other people in the university system?
Sometimes. It depends. I think the stigma is starting to break a little, and I do think that the majority of Ohioans believe in the medication itself. I just don't think there's a lot of education out there. So that's a lot of it, understanding the endocannabinoid system and how these cannabinoids bind with our receptors. When you explain it in those terms, the standard patient understands, oh, this is actually working within my body and regulating and creating homeostasis. And when they start talking like that, it just gives me such a thrill, because we all need to like you said, take away the old prohibition mentality. And I am giving away my age. I grew up in the times of the black market for many years, and fought that stigma, because I've always believed in this plant, and I always felt as if I was being lied to about Schedule 1 and all of these other things with drug companies, and we won't go into all that, but I always felt betrayed by that. So I just feel like now Ohioans have opened their eyes. They do want to see a good program. They don't want to see it get out of control. They like it being regulated as a medicinal plant. So I do feel like it's going to be a long time before we see recreation in Ohio. But I do feel like what we have set in place is working very well. And I'd like to just continue to see that program grow.
All right, you dated yourself, so I'm not going to harp on that, because I'm 63. I don't need to know your age. But one of the things that I do on this show is I play a song by an old rocker from the 60s and 70s, and the song is Shanty by Jonathan Edwards. Have you ever heard of that song?
If you would play it, I probably would know what it was.
Well, I could sing sing a little bit. I'm going to sit around the shanty and put a good buzz on every night and day. If I can help it, I'm going to lay her. Right? Sorry, that's my rendition. I don't normally sing in public, and you can understand why. Lisa, the medical program, you basically said, you're in Ohio. The medical program is established there. You pretty much said you won't see adult use rec, or you don't think there's much backing or advocacy for that. What do you think is causing? Is it the federal issue more than anything else, or is it still the stigma?
Both. I think if the scheduling would change, I think that's going to help people that have always had a different attitude about cannabis, that they would actually maybe change their minds because now they see the federal government moving on that. And sometimes that's what it takes for specific people. But I do think that I'm not going to say it's never going to happen. Of course, it's going to get back on a ballot someday. We tried to do it, but with COVID, we kind of got set back on trying to get a legalized program here in Ohio. And I just feel like it's going to be a tough fight here, but I'm not saying it won't ever happen. I'm not sure they'll ever allow home grow. But they may possibly allow rec down the road. It's
interesting. She said no home grow, and here in Massachusetts,
it was the first thing
and Vermont too. Vermont allowed you to grow it at home,
right,
but not sell it, and now Vermont is moving towards an adult use retail operation regulation. And in Massachusetts, they allow 12 plants if you have 2 adults in 1 dwelling.
Right.
Why do you think it is that they're afraid of the grow? Are they afraid like they're going to drive by fields of weed on the way to Miami U of Ohio or something like that?
I believe there's a couple things in play here. Remember, this was set up by the Board of Pharmacy here in the state of Ohio.
Right.
And these investors that have gotten licenses here have invested millions and millions of dollars to sell the product here in Ohio medicinally. If they would allow patients to do that, then they're taking away the support of the corporate world, right? I mean, it's going to back off a little bit. If you're allowing all your patients to grow, they're not going to spend as much in a dispensary. That's just the bottom line. And I think that's what this is really all about. Not only that, but we have issues with neighbors. We have odor control. We have a lot of things like that I believe would cause some problems here in Ohio. So I just think that right now we tried to get it passed with a home grow back before our medicinal program, and it was voted down. So I just think that's going to be something that they may go recreational, but I don't think they're going to want the home grow to be
That's
a part of that.
That's so surprising to me, really.
Yeah, I'm going to go away.
No, because my reaction is that you would think that we have recreational and adult use. We have adult use and we have medical cannabis in Massachusetts. But to your point, we both live in Massachusetts. We both have the right. I mean, if you, to be fair to the law, the law only protects you if you own property in Massachusetts. If you're a renter, you have zero protection under Massachusetts law. But if you own property in Massachusetts, I'm not going out there and growing plants right now. It's like I'm still buying my weed in a shop, even if I have the option to grow it on my own.
It's too much pressure. I mean, how do I know what I'm growing is going to be and granted, I also recognize as a home grower, you can get your stuff tested by a state certified lab, which is great. I think it's a $50 fee to get your stuff tested, which is great. But I mean, I can't imagine spending 14 weeks or 4 months with a plant, seeing it grow, seeing it flower, and then taking it to the testing lab and realize, oh, this is hemp. This isn't even THC-based cannabis.
Right, but imagine if the only way you could eat bread was if you had to grow the grain yourself, and you had to
go hungry.
Exactly. But to Lisa's point, I think I agree with her very much that we won't see. If we don't see home grow before, it won't in Ohio. It won't come until you have recreational adult use, because it's really hard to swallow a pill. Like, okay, it's been decriminalized. You can get a medical card. You can buy it in a decriminalized shop, but you can't grow it in your own backyard. I don't see long term. I don't see that being enforceable. Telling someone they can't grow a plant on their own property.
Right. Exactly. That's and it's a weed for crying out loud. I would be remiss. You're in the Cleveland School of Cannabis. You're in Cleveland, Ohio. There was a brawl in the city last night between 2 political candidates. I'm sure you've heard about this. I just want to make sure you're okay. And Ohio being a swing state and cannabis now becoming a political pawn in this process. It's amazing to me that in Washington, D.C., the Republicans have counted how many times the word cannabis the Democrats have put in their next COVID relief bill, and it's never going to pass. So we're at a stalemate, and yet cannabis is right in the middle of it. Cleveland was right in the middle of it last night. And I'll admit, I was one of the lucky ones. I chose not to watch. I was just dealt with the highlights because I would get too upset. But did the word cannabis ever get uttered in that debate? Does anybody know that? Anybody?
No. I watched it. I actually am not in Cleveland. We have a branch in Columbus as well. We don't.
Okay.
We have more than one school,
Sure,
so I didn't get to see the brawl one-on-one. But I did not hear. And I often told myself and others at the school, you know, all one of those candidates has to do is say that they're going to work with removing Schedule 1 cannabis from Schedule 1, and they would see a huge shift in votes. You know, I mean, I just think that is a big winner right now on both sides. So I just don't understand why they're afraid to take that on.
Yeah, because they don't understand it. It goes back to education. It goes back to the stigma. They've been told one thing for 80 years. They can't beat it.
Ridiculous partisanship is also a big part of this. We
Yes,
look at
it is.
John Boehner, used
Right.
to be former
That's right.
chair of the Senate,
Right.
now has his own cannabis company, says, oh, well, some smart people told me some things. Well, I think there were a lot of people telling a lot of folks a lot of things before a certain point, but suddenly you walk away from a particular political party, and now it's okay to jump in bed with cannabis. I think that's a pretty two-faced.
And I'm really afraid because getting rid of Schedule 1, Lisa, as you might know, Steve D'Angelo told me this, and you know, Steve is pretty connected, as you might know,
Sure.
with the cannabis community in California. It's an administrative thing. The President of the United States, and I don't like to use his name, can pick up the phone, call the DOJ, and get it descheduled. And I'm not going to put it by him to do that a week before, even though he's come out as anti and, you know, we don't have anything to do with it and it's left wing and all this stuff that he throws out there. But I'm still fearful that he'll use this as a way to get reelected. Now, granted, I just admitted, okay, I do lean on the other side, okay? Don't know what's going to happen, but Lord knows the Cleveland School of Cannabis will still be there. You'll still be teaching no matter what happens in November, correct?
That's right.
And the future is bright for the cannabis industry. And the fact that you guys place so many candidates, I take my hat off to you. I think it's a great thing you're doing there. And you know that you guys are welcome on this show to talk more anytime.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I believe that, you know, education builds nations, right?
Right.
So this is what we need to do with cannabis. We need to build a cannabis nation.
Absolutely. And Lisa Zwirner, thank you so much for joining us here on Cannabis Chat from the
Thank
Cleveland School of Cannabis on this day, this Professor Weed Wednesday that we like to call it here. She makes so many good points. And it gives you an idea, and especially here you are in the business.
Yeah.
In Massachusetts,
Yeah.
they place 70% of their, and you still,
That's incredible.
And you really hadn't heard of them before today.
No, and I'll tell you, I came into it a little biased because to me, the biggest part, my biggest question always about certifications is, are you placing the people? That's really what I care about most, because I think I even alluded to it when I was talking about who we hire, but we're looking for people with experience, or we're looking for people with experience in either customer service or cannabis. If there is a service that can, because frankly, talking about hiring, it is hard to hire someone in the cannabis industry. It usually takes about 2 months of background checks and follow-ups with the Cannabis Control Commission in this state. It costs us thousands of dollars just to get a candidate even to their very first day. So there is a lot invested by both people who are trying to join the industry and industry players who want to hire top talent. I would love it if there was a hiring educational service that could send us really top talent and was establishing a bar.
Absolutely. And they're the people to work with. I'd be happy to make that intro.
Yeah.
And Dan saying?
I feel like this is a good way to end the last question.
To wrap this up, yeah?
Someone asked if you are wearing a fake beard or not.
Oh, goodness, no. You can pull on this. You can real hair, real beard.
So jealous in so many ways. Andrew Elk, it's been a pleasure. You know what? You have the personality, you have the knowledge, you have the passion, all these things that I call the it factor.
Thank you, Jimmy.
So I hope you won't be a stranger.
No,
and,
I want to come back.
You absolutely can come back on this show anytime, any Wednesday, because it's all about education here.
I love Wednesdays.
And the beautiful thing, because Dan French knows how to work the Zoom thing, you don't even have to leave your living room anymore. You can join us on Zoom every Wednesday if you'd like.
You know, I'll wear a different bow tie next time even.
Oh, no, but I like the Rev
look?
Clinics.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. I love the fact that it's the same tie you had on in the Bubbler video, too. It was great. Well, that's going to do it for this show. Friday with David Rabinovitz, our Green Rush Friday, we've got 3 great guests coming in on Zoom. And rather than tease you, just tune in or check it out on demand after the fact. But we'll be here on Friday, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. again with another Cannabis Chat show. This time we focus on the finance, the business of the industry. So you want to tune into that. I believe we're going to run this week's Weed Talk News following this live stream. So by all means, if you want to see Curt Dalton do his thing, he is a master when it comes to commenting on just about everything there is to know about the cannabis industry and the news of the week. So that'll be coming up after this. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Curt Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net.
Every week, Curt and I get together and talk about the biggest stories in the cannabis universe, locally here in Massachusetts, coast to coast, and around the world.
And this week's no different, Jimmy. Vermont is actually getting a little bit closer to recreational sales. We have hemp thieves stealing hemp, thinking that they're getting marijuana. And one of the biggest brands in the world, Cookies, is making its way to Florida. But let's go right to Deb Borchardt of the Green Market Report for our Wall Street Minute. Take it away, Deb.
Thanks, guys. This week, the Vermont Senate cast a final vote in favor of S-54 legislation that would legalize, regulate, and tax cannabis sales. The bill now proceeds to the desk of Governor Phil Scott, and he hasn't said whether or not he's going to sign it. This would be the latest New England state to legalize cannabis, and that puts more pressure on the bordering state of New York. Aurora Cannabis delivered its official results for the fourth quarter. Only problem is they said that revenues are going to decline in the coming first quarter. Now, a couple of weeks ago, you may recall, Aurora said its fourth quarter net revenue fell 5% to $72 million. Now they're saying first quarter revenue is only going to come in between $60 million and $64 million. Kushco Holdings said that it expects its fourth quarter revenue now to come in between $25.5 million and $26 million. This is better than the third quarter revenue that came in at only $22.3 million. And it's an improvement over the previous guidance where they said they thought revenue was going to come in at between $24 and $26 million. Kushco said that the 14 to 17% expected increase in revenue is being driven primarily by an increase in sales to its top 100 customers. And that's the big business news for this week. I'm Deborah Borchardt from the Green Market Report for Weed Talk News.
So while we wait for Vermont Governor Phil Scott to pen the legalization bill for sales of cannabis in Vermont, there's another part of that bill that we should mention. It has to do with the expungement of records of inmates who've been convicted for small cannabis possession crimes. Laura Subin, who is the executive director of the Vermont Coalition to Regulate Cannabis, released this quote, "We view this as a critical component of a movement towards racial justice and cannabis policy. It recognizes and aims to repair some of the horrific legacy of racism and the enforcement of cannabis prohibition laws." Unquote. Curt, I think she nailed it right on the head.
Yeah, and expungement is such an important part of this process because the things that were taken away from their lives when they were arrested, like voting rights, access to jobs with a background check, a criminal check, that has to be reversed as well. So they have to have the ability to vote. People have to have the ability to get a job or have a record cleaned when there's a background check done. It's the right way to do it.
And another news item out of Washington, D.C. from the marijuana moment is that there is now a coalition of cannabis advocacy businesses who are trying to legalize interstate commerce between legal states. The Alliance for Sensible Markets campaign is pushing governors of legal cannabis states to enter into an interstate compact. Now, before the lawyers get involved with this and kind of challenge the constitutionality of this, keep in mind that a recognized agreement between two or more states to establish a framework for interstate commerce is actually a precedent that was set back in 1921 when New York and New Jersey signed a similar agreement that created the Port Authority of New York. So, if New Jersey makes it legal and New York has a medicinal program, they could work out an exchange, as well as Western states, California and Oregon. Curt, do you think we'll ever see this?
In this form, it has 0% chance of going through. What they don't mention, and God bless the effort, is that you're dealing with a Schedule I drug by the federal government, and states do not have the authority to supersede federal law or create it or change it. That's kind of been the whole problem. So while I value the look at history and the loophole that they're trying through, it will never happen this way, and it has 0 chance of that going through.
So obviously, after the election, if there actually is a change of leadership in the United States, it has a better chance of going through. Agreed?
I would agree that that is certainly the first choice. Lawsuits like Steve D'Angelo's challenging the constitutionality at the federal level are second. This is another kind of wink, wink, Hail Mary that I don't see this ever working. Not to mention, even if you got momentum, the federal government could challenge this for years in different appeals courts.
All right, so it is harvest season for hemp and marijuana, but it's the fields of hemp that are being targeted by thieves, since, of course, it's tough to tell the difference between a hemp plant and the same cannabis plant with THC in it. It has always been a target of people who think they're stealing weed and end up with non-intoxicating hemp. It happened in Georgia when a farmer interrupted an attempted theft from his industrial hemp patch. Over 10 pounds of hemp was recovered when the thieves were caught and cooperated with police. The price of those plants about $1,000 for 10 pounds. Curt, a big difference between 10 pounds of hemp and 10 pounds of marijuana.
Yeah, this is a scene right out of a Will Ferrell or Mark Wahlberg movie where the thieves sneak into the field, they cut down, a truckload, and they're all happy. And they realize they have hemp. So unless they're planning on making some CBD tinctures or some really nice CBDs drops, they're going to be greatly disappointed after they use the hemp.
And pay their fines for doing it. All right, another story about illegal grows is coming from New Mexico, where illegal cannabis is growing amongst legal grows of hemp. Now, add in the fact that these farms are just off Native American lands and owned by Chinese businessmen, they have caught the attention of the Council of the Navajo Nation, the Department of Homeland Security, and many other law enforcement entities. It seems that kids are being trafficked into New Mexico to tend to these crops. Some of these kids are as young as 10 years old. Illegal grows are starting to get more and more attention from law enforcement, and this may have uncovered a human trafficking ring. Certainly, probably something they'd like to stop, especially the human trafficking, and certainly not what you want to see in a hemp or in a cannabis field, correct?
Yeah, we talked about things that are compressing the margins all the way around on the bottom line, where you have to find a way to create some margin. And unfortunately, child labor and forced labor is certainly a way to find some margin on the bottom line. And unfortunately, this is an ugly side of a lot of parts of life, whether it be a sneaker factory or out of the United States picking tomatoes or whatever it's going to be. Hemp and cannabis are being attached to this, and it's a black eye all the way around, not just for the hemp and cannabis industry, but just child labor and child trafficking is a pretty sick thing altogether.
Absolutely, has to start. That has to stop. So now in Fortuna, California, a $1,000 a day fine will be administered as a deterrent for local illegal grows once local enforcement issues a warning. Now, those who do get fined will not be prosecuted or arrested for this misdemeanor, but is that $1,000 a day enough to stop growing illegally, Curt?
Depends how big your grow is. And if you're thinking about this, you'd want to have grows in multiple locations and just realize this may be the new cost of doing business on the black market. If you have 4 or 5 locations and hey, one's going to get taken down every 6 months, and you work that into your financial equations, the fact it's not a criminal charge and there's a warning first, I think people are going to continue to push the limits, as we like to say.
Everybody's doing a little bit of a cash grab. Meanwhile, up in Canada, it's time for Solomon Israel's MJ Biz Daily International Report and another record set from our northern borders. Take it away, Solomon.
I'm Solomon Israel from Marijuana Business Daily International, and this is your Weed Talk News Canadian Cannabis Report. Canadian sales of recreational marijuana hit yet another new high in July. The regulated market surpassed 231 million Canadian dollars, up more than 15% over June. On an annualized basis, July's figures imply a market worth 2.8 billion Canadian dollars. Meanwhile, Aurora Cannabis posted a net loss approaching 1.9 billion Canadian dollars for the quarter ended June 30th. All told, the company lost 3.3 billion during its 2020 fiscal year. New CEO Miguel Martin said he plans to refocus Aurora's brand portfolio to prioritize premium brands. And the government of British Columbia is working on a program to allow farm gate sales from small licensed cannabis producers. That would let those growers sell their own crop directly from stores located at their production sites. But there's a catch. The program isn't scheduled to launch until 2022, and a provincial election is scheduled before then. You can read those stories and more at mjbizdaily.com. I'm Solomon Israel from Marijuana Business Daily.
According to MJ Biz Daily, cannabis consumers are spending more during COVID per visit in California, Nevada, Washington State, and Colorado. Facts like that are available in the MJ Biz Daily 2020 Factbook. You can get yours at mjbizdaily.com.
A California company known for its celebrity ownership called Cookies has just bought a license to operate a medical dispensary in Florida. Curt, do you know of a rapper named Burner?
I've heard of him before, yes.
I haven't before I read this story. Anthony Milan is his real name, and he will be the first person of color to own a license to operate in Florida, and it will be located in Port Richey, scheduled to open in 2021. So I guess that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, Cookies is a great brand. If you've read the backstory, it's still privately held, and they've just done such a good job establishing the difference in a commodity, right? We've always talked about how cannabis is going to be a commodity, tomatoes, cabbage, grapefruit, whatever it's going to be. And Cookies has really defined a market. It's what MedMen should have been, right? That's kind of where it's at, where Cookies is the success story that went under the radar, privately held. They're doing it right in every state. As soon as you see the store, you know it for its quality as well as its design. Again, it's kind of where MedMen should have been, the vision. Cookies actually is the reality.
And Cookies is a great name for a weed dispensary, let's face it, because there's always munchies involved, right? I mean, that's obviously where they came from. Anyway, hard to believe there is an issue with delivery in Colorado, a state where it's been legal for 10 years. Sure enough, Colorado Springs is banning the delivery of medical marijuana, citing a public safety issue and the cost of regulation. Curt, I do not get this one.
No, it's funny. The price of cannabis per pound or marijuana in Colorado is like a 3-year high, which tells me if it's just supply and demand, there's a lot of demand, whether it's black market or above the board for that Colorado bud. So it's strange to see a medical thing. Maybe there's an incident there, or, what about recreational? So I think there's a little more to that story. And there could be some players making that happen for strategic purposes in their business, but we'll have to wait and see.
And now it's time for the DC Report with Vote Pro Podcast, Phil Adams. Phil?
Here with the Weed Talk News, DC Report. Postponing a House vote on the MORE Act until after Election Day will not slow the momentum toward cannabis reform, say industry lobbyists. That is, provided the Democrats retain control of the House. David Mangione of the Liaison Group, a DC lobby firm for the National Cannabis Roundtable, expects lawmakers to push for cannabis descheduling with a social justice component. Mangione believes this will offer a more comprehensive solution toward aligning state and federal marijuana laws, saying, quote, "The House has set a new line in the sand. This is what impactful cannabis reform will look like." Cannabis Trade Federation advisor Steve Fox agrees, saying, quote, "Social justice is leading the push for reform and the drive for a regulated market. It's really where we've been at the state level." The Food and Drug Administration will release draft guidelines designed to streamline approvals of CBD-based medications. The FDA announced it is soliciting public feedback from researchers who are interested in submitting new drug applications for CBD products. The guidelines come 2 years after the agency approved Epidiolex, a brand of CBD-based epilepsy medication. The FDA is also actively seeking research contractors to help study the non-toxicating cannabinoid. In news from outside the Beltway, Ethos Cannabis announced the purchase of 3 medical dispensaries in Maryland. The Philadelphia-based company has acquired the rights to 4Front dispensaries in 3 locations along the DC-Baltimore corridor. The purchase is part of an $18 million deal with multi-state cannabis company 4Front Ventures. Currently operating under 4Front's Mission brand, the dispensaries will be rebranded to Ethos. That's the Weed Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
A few months ago, Curt and I talked with Melissa Metley, who is one of the principals at the group called South Dakota for Better Marijuana Laws. Now, legalization for adult use and medical marijuana are both on the ballot in South Dakota, and a recent poll says that over 60% of the voters there are planning on approving those initiatives. That group released some disturbing but not so surprising stats about cannabis arrests in that state. Did you know one of nearly 10 arrests in 2018 was for cannabis possession, and many were carried out on a racially disproportionate basis? Once again, Curt, weed legalization is now more about racial profiling than making the plant legal.
Yeah, especially in a state like that. I mean, I was going to say, good, we can get the child labor straightened out off the Indian reservations on a state like that. But to see 61%, we had talked to Melissa before, it's really gaining traction. And her group, if you remember, was the one that was really behind both of those ballot questions and pushing it. So congrats to her for not only getting it there, but obviously having a strong majority ready to legalize.
Absolutely, and hopefully after Election Day, and if it passes, we'll reach back out to Melissa to congratulate her for sure. Now, one last story about those devastating fires on the West Coast, in Oregon specifically, and sure enough, the Small Business Administration confirmed that none of the farms that were destroyed are eligible for any kind of relief funds. Now, the Oregonian is reporting that 7 companies lost everything. Canyon Cannabis, Grateful Meds, Blue River Grass Station, and Fireside Dispensary were a few. And amazingly, the fire came within 3 miles of Jim Belushi's farm, but the wind changed direction and it was spared. Jim Belushi issued an appeal for his fellow growers yesterday. He wants you to go to the Jackson County United Way website. They have a campaign to try to raise funds specifically for that area, and we are showing the link for you to go to that. Basically, it's unitedwayofjacksoncounty.org/give/. So, Curt, hopefully people will feel bad about this and donate some money back to some of the businesses that were just, you know, isn't it interesting? Our citizens have to do what our federal government won't do.
Yeah, it's kind of this tightrope to walk due to insurance policies for cannabis in some states and what's covered and crops. So it's a real disaster, even the California fires. So anybody that can, you enjoy the plant, you enjoy the product. If you can give a little, everybody gives a little. It just goes a long way for those farmers who are growing the product you enjoy.
Just trying to make a living. Growing Belushi, the show on Discovery, is hoping for a second season. They're actually in negotiations right now. Now, I understand there's a virtual convention this coming weekend, 10X, and I believe we know someone involved with that. Curt, you and Bruce Linton getting together for that, are you?
I think there may be a little banter back and forth. If you want to check it out, it's the finals of Cannabis 10X coming up this weekend. Judges are Cheech Marin and Bruce Linton, and we'll be doing a piece kind of before the final judging. So stay tuned for that.
And there's a YouTube video out there that promotes that event. And Curt, I discovered it and told them the correct way to spell your name, which they screwed up the first time, although they were very happy and very apologetic they had done that to you. But I got your back, man.
Hey, thank you. There's a level, Belushi's at the Discovery Channel. I'm at the YouTube misspelling of my name, but it's a long way to the top, Jimmy, and I'm still going.
All right, that'll do it for this week's Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young for Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Curt Dalton with Cannabis.net.
Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
We Talk Now, We Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, Cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the WeedTube, and YouTube. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.